Honestly, my main goal for this video is for me to use descriptive words other than boring to describe these movies. Hello everyone, my name is Caitlin and welcome back to my channel. So 6 years ago this month, I posted a little video called I Watched Every Barbie Movie So You Don't Have To. That video quickly skyrocketed into becoming one of the most popular videos that I've ever put out. If I happen to run into any viewers on the street, the chances that they bring up that video are very high. And dare I say, it was a bit revolutionary at the time. I remember before making that video looking up if anyone had done it already and I wasn't able to find anything. And while today many have weighed in with their own rankings, I still feel like that video from 6 years ago is still in the conversation. However, it has been 6 years, which means that new movies have come out. We now have 44 Barbie movies as opposed to the original 36 that I ranked to begin with. And also since then, I have been making Barbie movie content fairly consistently. So I feel like I now have a bit of a deeper connection to the franchise as opposed to back in 2019 when I was just getting reacquainted with it. So I thought in honor of that anniversary, it's time that I rank them once again. I have forbidden myself from rewatching my original video and seeing how I ranked them before, mainly because I feel like I can be very persuasive and I don't want past Caitlin influencing present day Caitlin. Obviously, I do have some memories of the previous list, but for the most part, I wanted to go into this with a completely clean slate. And who knows, maybe at the end of the video, we can revisit how I ranked them before. Also, another thing I didn't do last time is we're going to be breaking up this list into 3 categories. It's pretty straightforward. It's just going to be the bottom 15 and then the middle 14 and then the top 15. Hopefully that will make this video a bit more digestible as we are dealing with over 40 movies this time. Oh, and also the live action Barbie movie will not be included in this. This video is strictly regarding the animated films. But with all that being said, let's jump right into the bottom of this list. So one thing that I did know going into this video was which movie I had ranked in last place originally because I had hated it so very much. However, going into this, I was somewhat optimistic that maybe it wouldn't be as bad as I remembered. But I was sadly mistaken, and so coming in at number 44 at the bottom of the list once again is Barbie and her sisters in a puppy chase.
Yeah. Thanks for the help.
No problem. Hashtag Sisters Rock.
So for Puppy Chase, it's fairly straightforward, but while the girls are on vacation in Hawaii, their puppies go missing. This leads Barbie and her sisters to set out on a journey to find them. As I said, I hated this movie so much when I watched it the first time, and I honestly never thought that I would see a day in which I would rewatch it, and yet here we are. And honestly, the worst part about it is that everything Barbie does in this movie is so not Barbie of her. The Barbie that we know is always overprepared and overqualified for everything that she does. They even make a joke about her being that way in this movie, and yet it falls flat because this is the one instance in which she isn't those things. She also doesn't listen to any of Chelsea's concerns about needing to practice, and this is particularly frustrating because the whole reason as to why they're even on this trip to begin with is for Chelsea's dance competition. And so in the end, when she messes up her routine on stage, it's not surprising because she didn't have any time to practice and is still going off of no food and no sleep. They also lose their map within the first 5 seconds on this journey, which really grinds my gears. And then Barbie refuses to head back to the hotel after this as she argues that it's a small island and it shouldn't be hard to get around. This island that they've never been to before and have no idea where they're going. And then the following day, when they see a giant hole in the middle of the road, Barbie decides that they should just hike up a mountain in the opposite direction instead.
Just when I thought the day couldn't get any better.
We don't have time for this.
It's okay. We got this. There has to be another way out. There!
And then it gets even worse because when we're finally getting there, they've got their camper van now, they're making their way, they then run out of gas. And then when Barbie is questioned about checking where they were at for gas, she argues that at least the van got them this far. So I honestly don't know how all of those things could have happened in this movie and I was still supposed to enjoy it by the end of it. And that's without even mentioning the dancing horses, which are arguably the reason for all of this because they were the surprise that Barbie dragged them out to sea right after landing. You also might remember something that I discussed last time, which is the what if game.
And then they make up this what if game, which has been like a joke between me and Nina since, where it's like, what if we didn't have to sleep on the ground and weren't stranded out in a jungle? And they're like, yeah, that'd be great. Like, it's such a pointless game. And this movie was just so frustrating.
I was very annoyed by this game last time and was kind of dreading it getting brought up again. And so that first like 22 minutes of peace before it was brought up were just crucial for me. Moving on to number 43, we have Barbie and Princess Power.
Big deal, she saved a statue. I'm the one who caught the bad guys. Where's my picture?
Now, I'm not exactly too sure where I placed this one last time, but I imagine it was quite low as well. This one follows Princess Cara, who after being kissed by a magical butterfly gains superpowers. She then decides to use her powers for good to serve and protect her people. Now, at the beginning, I can honestly say that this movie wasn't that bad. And I was actually pleasantly surprised by this because I was not looking forward to rewatching this one. But then as the movie went on, I was reminded as to why I didn't really enjoy it the first time. First of all, the villain is absolute garbage and he doesn't actually do anything until the last 20 minutes of the movie. Cara is also a terrible superhero overall, maybe one of the worst that I've seen. And yet she acts like she's top dollar, and that just really irks me. I know for a majority of this movie she was still new at being a superhero, but I still feel like she does so many questionable things throughout this movie that I just had to bring them up. She drops people in mid-air a lot. At one point she almost makes a civilian crash into a transport truck because of this. Also, later on, while catching a burglar, she hands him into the police by throwing him in mid-air into the police station. She also throws a cop car in mid-air with a bank robber inside of it, and then throws this car at another bank robber. The car somehow catches him, and then they're both in the car spinning out of control. Speaking of this moment though, I do think that it is important that I touch on how the burglar ended up in the police car to begin with, which is actually quite simple. The police arrived on the scene of the crime, and then the bank robber ran up to the cop car, took the policeman out of the driver's seat, and then got in himself and drove away. Lastly, we have to talk about the volcano moment at the end of the movie, and I believe I touched on this last time.
And then at the end, there's like lava coming from a volcano, and it like surrounds the palace, and then Cara just like pushes it, and then it's fine. That's not really how lava works, so that kind of made me mad.
She also just like leaves her entire family in there saying that they're safe now that she pushed it back to normal, when I really don't think that that was the case. But maybe I'm wrong, as of course by the end of the movie, the castle is totally fine. Also worth mentioning before we move on is the fact that there is a fountain in the middle of the city that features their king spitting water out of his mouth. And so that's princess power.
But we're a
Thanks so much, Barbie. You're the best.
TM.
Up next, we have Barbie Video Game Hero, and I think I maybe ranked this one a little bit higher than I should have last time around. Part of that was probably because when I did this video for the first time, I watched all of the movies backwards, which I know maybe doesn't sound like the brightest thing to do, but I really just wanted to watch the movies that I hadn't seen first. But then that also means that I watched this movie second. So it makes sense that I liked it more as I was just getting into the movies and my mind was still fresh at the time that I watched it. Whereas this time around, it was the 35th movie that I watched, and so it was a little bit of a different situation. But safe to say I did not enjoy it nearly as much. Basically, in this one, Barbie is sucked into the world of a video game after her in-game tutorial comes to life and comes to her for help in defeating a in-game virus. Interestingly enough though, this movie is kind of the last of its kind, as after this one, we kind of go into the Barbie Dreamhouse Adventures realm and have basically stayed there ever since. There's no more Barbie as an actress and she's playing a character sort of thing like we saw in the earlier movies. Even in this movie, she is technically Dreamhouse Adventures Barbie, but she still has more of that character and story vibe that the previous movies had. The only thing I really remember talking about before is the Just Dance tie-in with this movie.
And there was a lot of Just Dance plugs, which were unnecessary. I don't know if this movie was sponsored. It had to have been sponsored.
Do you know what's even more awesome?
No. What?
Just Dance.
But also, the Just Dance song that they used in the end of this movie might be the worst thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Also, if you're not familiar, Barbie is like a video game developer in this movie, and so we see her doing a lot of coding and such. And so it's kind of weird if you think about it, but the in-game tutorial that comes to her for help was created by her. And so the fact that she wasn't more alarmed about it going rogue was a little bit odd to me. But then she also like doesn't know anything about the game, and so I don't think she created this game. She just created the game tutorial. I don't know, it gets a bit messed up when you think about it. Also, it makes absolutely no sense that this virus would just back off if you beat a level, but I respect it for plot reasons. Moving on to number 41 is Mermaid Power.
She knew mermaids were real because she was one.
So this is the lowest one that I have ranked in regards to like the newer sort of Barbie movie era that we're currently in. And to even begin to do a synopsis of this movie, I kind of have to do even more explaining in regards to some previous lore. So in another Barbie movie, Big City, Big Dreams, the Barbie character that we know as in like blonde hair, blue-eyed Barbie meets another girl also named Barbie. The two have since become good friends, and we have seen them star alongside one another in a few movies since then. They've also created nicknames for one another based off of where they're from, and so the Barbie that we know is now Malibu, and this new Barbie is now Brooklyn. And then there's also another Barbie movie that we will get to called Dolphin Magic, and then in that movie, Barbie befriended this mermaid called Isla, and then that brings us up to mermaid power. So in this movie, Isla calls upon Malibu and Brooklyn to compete in a mermaid power keeper competition. So this one is kind of like a sequel to Dolphin Magic, which you would think would give it bonus points because I do like that movie, but it kind of ended up having the opposite effect. Isla looked weird and I had a hard time seeing her as the same person. And I also had a hard time seeing Dolphin Magic Barbie as this Barbie, which is interesting because it hadn't even been that long between the two movies, and yet the characters just felt so different to me. But at the same time, Dolphin Magic was particular in the fact that it was still somewhat grounded in reality. While Barbie does meet and befriend a mermaid, she does not become one herself. Whereas in this one, she does, which was a bit of a jump. Also, not only does Barbie become a mermaid, but so do all of her sisters and the other Barbie as well. The villain also changed a little bit in this movie. In the last one, her motive was to capture these special gemstone dolphins and sell them for money. Whereas this time around, she is now completely invested in mermaids and has this whole mermaid backstory, which was fine. I just don't think that that backstory was necessary when she literally saw Isla as a mermaid in the previous movie, and they could have just made that her motive instead. It's also a musical, which I have many thoughts on. Most, if not all of the recent Barbie movies have been musicals, when originally it was more like 1 out of every 5 movies were musicals. And the reason this irritates me is because a lot of the recent movies don't really lend themselves well to a musical format, and this is one of them. The songs didn't feel relevant to the story, they didn't drive the plot, and in the second half of the movie, I feel like they just forget that it's a musical to begin with until that final number. And I'm sure a lot of this I have said already, as I did do a review of this movie back when it came out, but overall this one was just really hard for me to get through, and was honestly the reason as to why I stopped watching the new movies as they came out, just because I was so disappointed with this one. And speaking of movies that disappointed me, up next we have Barbie as the princess and the pop star.
Wait! I was hoping to run into you. Yesterday was so much fun.
Uh-huh, that's nice. Yeah!
So this is one that I'm sure a lot of you probably hoped that I would change my opinion on, as I know that it is very well loved, but unfortunately that was not the case. And honestly, after revisiting, this movie isn't even really that bad, it just makes me angry. So fed up with the duties that their own lives entail, Princess Tori and pop star Kira decide to switch lives for a day to see what the others is like. And I'm sure I talked about this last time, but my main point of irritation with this movie is our two leads, Kira and Tori.
You've got these two girls who were just so ungrateful and talking about how they wish they had someone else's lives when they had such good lives. And then you've got this pop star who's like lying to her record company saying that she's written her whole album when she hasn't even started it yet. And then this princess is supposed to write this speech and she like just won't do it. And they're both just ungrateful and it made me mad.
This time around, I was able to empathize with Kira a little bit more than Tori. Her main conflict is that she's been struggling to find inspiration for new music, which is something that I can definitely empathize with. But that being said, I don't appreciate how she lies about new music existing when that's not the case. But she also expresses issues with the tabloids and feeling as though her life is about everything but the music. Tori, on the other hand, I have a much harder time sympathizing with. Her main conflict is that she has a very strict aunt who wants her to stop pulling pranks and focus more on her princess duties, like writing a speech that she's supposed to give. This leads her to become jealous of Kira because she thinks that she's got it made and has never worked a day in her life, which is giving very out of touch and also lazy. And I'm just like, who wants to watch a main character that has no ambition or drive? Also, I gotta say, I kind of agree with her aunt. Like, she's almost 18. What is she doing still pulling pranks? Like, that's almost embarrassing. And then there's the fact that this girl didn't even know that her kingdom is still in a drought. Like, she's just so incredibly out of touch, it's almost hard to watch. Now let's talk music. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The opening song, Here I Am, is is a banger, and it's probably the best thing to come out of this movie in my opinion, but I do still think that mashing it up with Princesses Just Wanna Have Fun was not the right call, and I do still hate that cover. We then go into I Wish I Had Her Life, which is probably the song that I dislike the most from this movie. That is of course other than To Be a Princess / Pop Star.
They do a terrible take on To Be a Princess that makes me so upset.
Here's the camera, there's the camera, and a camera, and a camera.
But I Wish I Had Her Life really grinds my gears, especially in comparison to the beautifully written Free from the original. In The Princess and the Pauper, you have this perfectly executed song about how much these two girls yearn for freedom, whereas in this one, you just have these two very well-off girls complaining about the fact that they still have to do stuff. And then there's also the magical diamond tree and the villain, who I really disliked, and I honestly could go on and on about all of the things wrong with this movie, but I know that there are people out there who do really like it, and so I'm just gonna leave it at that. Up next, we have our first Christmas movie to talk about, which is Barbie: A Perfect Christmas.
Look! Skipper! I found it! I found my coat!
This is another one that I think that I ranked way too high last time, but I do think that I did address the fact that it was ranked too high, and my excuse for that was because it was nostalgic. Like, I remember my little sister watching this one growing up, but now I feel like I'm not nearly as blinded by nostalgia and I'm able to see this movie for what it is, which is not that great. This one was actually Barbie's very first movie with her sisters, and it follows the four of them planning to spend Christmas in New York, but then a snowstorm leaves them stranded and they end up having to have their perfect Christmas at a remote inn instead. Getting into the characters first, as this is the first movie that features her sisters. First of all, Barbie's youngest sister, Kelly, is now Chelsea in this movie, and as someone who grew up with her being Kelly, this change does hurt a little bit. Also, Chelsea was really annoying in this movie, and so that didn't help either, but to be fair, one of her main things in this movie was just wanting to do everything Stacy did, which is a pretty realistic older and younger sister dynamic. Now, this one is another musical, and I have to admit that I was a little bit upset with past Caitlin for axing Christmas songs from my Barbie movie song ranking video during this. I do understand why I did it, and I do still stand by that decision, but then when I was watching this movie, I didn't know any of the songs, and that made it less fun, and I really don't like being out of the loop. But there is this one number where Barbie sings about wishing that their Christmas turns out right, and I really like that she wishes that they'll have the perfect Christmas and not that they'll make it to New York City, as I feel like that distinction was important. But she also sings this song in the middle of the night in the inn's empty lobby, and she goes full out with the lyrical dancing, which I just found to be a little bit funny. And it also made me feel bad that Barbie was under all of this pressure, and it made me wonder where her parents were at, but that's a conversation for another day.
The only thing I wrote down is that I fell asleep watching it. So, it's alright.
And then we have probably my lowest ranked quote-unquote classic Barbie movie, which is Thumbelina.
So let's rip up this field! Yeah!
Now, while this is somewhat of a classic, I have no fears in regards to ranking it this low, because after 6 years of making Barbie content, I have yet to come across a die-hard Thumbelina fan. But basically, when the construction of a new factory threatens the home of the Twillerbys, Thumbelina befriends a human girl in hopes of convincing her parents to stop the project. This is another one that I really didn't like the last time I watched it, and so to say that I wasn't looking forward to this rewatch would be an understatement. But then surprisingly, it actually wasn't as bad as I remembered. It was the last one to have an intro with Barbie telling the story of the movie. This one is also interesting because it's one where I don't actually think the main character is played by Barbie. Like, I don't actually think Thumbelina is Barbie, as they don't have the same face or voice. I do like the color palette that they used for this movie though. As you can tell, I'm a big fan of pink and green. I also liked the dolls that went along with it and the environmental message.
Environmental, we're all about that being green.
In the end though, this one was honestly just way too modern and didn't have that same classic cozy feel that the other movies that came out around this time did. And so because of that, this movie just ends up feeling very out of place. At number 37, we have Barbie and Chelsea, The Lost Birthday.
Seriously?
No, I made that up to create some drama. It gets kind of boring out here sometimes.
In this movie, Chelsea takes the lead as the Roberts family head off on a tropical cruise, but trouble ensues after crossing the international date line causes them to skip over Chelsea's birthday. So this is another one that I did a review on back when it came out, and one that I wasn't exactly looking forward to revisiting. I think last time I just felt like it was very obviously geared to an even younger audience because Chelsea was in the lead this time, but I'm honestly not too sure if I agree with that take on this watch. It really just comes down to the fact that story-wise, this movie just wasn't my favorite. The villain in this movie was the activities director, and I still don't understand why he sucked so much or what his motives were. Also, spoiler alert, but the whole movie is like a Chelsea dream sequence, and so in her dream, all of her stuffed animals come to life, but they're actually real animals, and each one represents one of her sisters. It's very Wizard of Oz. But she falls asleep on a lifeboat on this cruise ship, and I just felt like that had to be a bit of a safety hazard. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about The Lost Birthday. Up next, we have our first sequel, I guess not including mermaid power, but it is Barbie Mariposa and the Fairy Princess.
Oh no! What's wrong? I came to get you for the ball and you're not even ready.
In this movie, we return to the world of Mariposa almost 5 years later, and basically Mariposa, a butterfly fairy, is asked to live in the Crystal Fairy's palace with the royal family for a week to prove that the two fairy species can get along. Or, as I said last time, it's pretty much just an allegory for racism.
She's a butterfly fairy, and she has to go to the Crystal Fairy realm to like defeat racism, I guess.
And I do think that I might have ranked this one higher last time, but this time around I just really wasn't looking forward to it. And that's mainly because on this rewatch, I just completely fell in love with the first movie. And so I was kind of dreading watching this sequel because it comes out so much later, and I just knew that it would be so different. And it's so disappointing because I feel like Mariposa deserved a way better sequel than this. It was literally set up for one in the previous movie with Henna vowing to return, and I really just don't understand why they didn't just follow through on that in this movie. Also, the rest of the lore that was set up in the first movie, I would have much preferred to learn more about in this movie instead. Like, there was hardly any mention of the Skeezites or the rest of Fairytopia in this movie when I feel like there should have been. Also, I love Kelly Sheridan, but she is not Mariposa, and having her voice her in this movie instead of Kiara just felt wrong. They also had somebody else narrating the beginning of the movie instead of Alina, which I also hated. And then they even went as far as to replace her little bunny sidekick, Zinzi, with this like Bibble knockoff. And then they don't even explain her existence whatsoever. The movie's aesthetic, I also feel like completely misses the mark. One of the main things I love so much about Mariposa is that deep, rich color palette with the dark pinks and purples. And then this movie, I just feel like threw all of that out the window. To the point where even though Mariposa is wearing the same outfit in both films, I can't even compute that they are the same thing. I also feel like in the first movie, they did a really good job of making the butterfly fairies seem like a smaller species in comparison to like Alina, for example, but once again, that's not the case in this movie. There's also the villain who, like I said, should have just been Henna, but instead they gave us this new villain who was the Gwillian. And I only bring her up because I find it funny that she gets a the in front of her name. Like, imagine if I was the Caitlyn. Like, that's just so ridiculous. I can't help but laugh. She also gets a redemption in the end where they basically just like give her what she wanted to begin with. And while I like the message of this, I do feel like she should have maybe faced some sort of consequences for her actions, especially when she was the source of so much trauma for Catania. But speaking of Catania, she's probably the movie's one saving grace, and I do still really like her character. And of course, I do still ship her and Mariposa together. Moving on to number 35, we have Barbie Spy Squad.
Wish I could stay and hang, but you know me. Places to go, things to steal.
And I definitely think that this one has jumped a little bit higher on my list, or at least I hope it has. And I mainly think that that is just due to the fact that I really just wasn't paying attention the first time I watched this movie. But in this one, gymnast Barbie, along with her friends Teresa and Renee, are recruited by a secret intelligence agency to become spies and catch a jewel thief. So last time, I feel like my main critique of this movie is that these girls just really were not very good spies.
They were such bad spies. They couldn't do anything. And then when they did do something in the end, It just felt like they were bad throughout the whole movie and then they got good for like the ending.
And while I do stand by that statement, I do think that I need to add some context. Because in this movie, we only really see them on a total of 3 missions. So it honestly makes sense that they wouldn't be the best spies right out the gate. But at the same time, I also agreed with the director of National Intelligence for terminating their training after their first 2 missions failed, as the girls had 2 very opportune chances to catch the jewel thief, and yet they still failed miserably. Speaking of the jewel thief, I love how you could tell right away who she was, and the fact that this big spy organization was having a hard time capturing this teenage gymnast. And then obviously we come to find out that she is working for Agent Dunbar, and it's like this big reveal that he's actually been a double agent all of this time. But I personally found it to be a bit obvious. Although, to be fair, I have seen this movie before, but it has been 6 years in my defense. I also think that they were setting this one up for a sequel as well, as in the end, Dunbar makes this promise that this isn't the last that they'll see of him. But then of course that never happened. Now before we move on to number 34, I wanted to take a second for a palette cleanser as we talk about today's sponsor, Kitsch. Even though we haven't gotten to the more iconic Barbie movies yet with the more memorable hairstyles, I still feel like Barbie's hair is on point in every single one of these movies. And dare I say, I think she would love Kitsch. I personally am in love with their shampoo and conditioner bars. Kitsch bars are free of phthalates, parabens, silicones, and sulfates. Also, by using the bars, you're cutting down on the use of single-use plastics, and so you're doing something good for your hair and the environment as well. I personally have the Rice Water Protein Shampoo and Conditioner bars, mainly because the rice water helps repair damaged hair follicles and prevents split ends. And ever since I've gotten hair extensions, I've honestly needed all the help I can get, as I'm now dealing with hair that is a completely different texture and temperament than the hair that comes out of my head. And speaking of my own hair, unlike the hair extensions, it's very prone to being overly moisturized, and so these bars also help reduce that as well. I'm also in love with the shower caddy, not just because it helps everything drain properly, but also just because I think it looks really cute in my shower. Here are the before and after results of me using the bars. So if you want to try out Kitsch, you can click that link in the description and use code CaitlynMcKillop for 25% off your first order. Kitsch ships in the US and internationally to over 27 countries. They also have a subscription option for an even better discount. So be sure to check them out, and with all that being said, let's move on to number 34.
Philippe! How dare you defile my stable, you festering boil on a baboon's backside?
And you are the hair of a pig's nostril!
I spit on the toe of your uncle!
So Barbie and Her Sisters in a Ponytail is the second movie featuring her sisters, but the first movie where they're actually in the title. I also think that I ranked this one slightly higher this time than where I had it originally. And one thing I do remember is how I completely botched my synopsis of this movie last time, and so I have come more prepared this time.
We've got her sisters, they're back again, and they're gonna go to this place to ride horses. Oh, it was her aunt's place. Her aunt has a ranch. Yeah, and then while they're there, Barbie discovers this like magical race of horses that are white, and that's why they're magic, because they have pink hair too.
But basically, while visiting their aunt's riding academy in Switzerland, Barbie discovers this ancient breed of wild horses that were thought to be just a myth. No, they are not magic, they just have pink streaks in their hair for unknown reasons. Actually, I think we do know the reason, and that it was just for aesthetic purposes. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I'm not really in touch with the horse world. I think I said this last time, but I am allergic to horses, and so I basically know nothing. But to be honest, I really didn't like how they handled the wild horses in this movie. And it seems to be a common trope in horse media to be like the one that's able to tame the wild horse, but I'm just like, can't we just leave them be? Can't we just let them be wild? Barbie wanting to train Majesty just really rubbed me the wrong way. And then she even ends up riding him in the competition at the end of the movie, which I really didn't like. Especially when she had only ever ridden him once before, and he's never even used a saddle or reins before. She also at one point talks about bringing him back to Malibu with her, which I really didn't like. Luckily, at the end of the movie, she does do the right thing and lets the horse be free. And like I said, I know absolutely nothing about the horse world, and so I could be completely off base with this, and so feel free to educate me in the comments. There was also this one part near the end of the movie that I completely forgot about, where Barbie on her horse jumps over this other horse that is also mid-jump, and so now they're both in the air on top of one another. It was crazy, and I couldn't help but burst out laughing. I also find it funny how the girls now have an aunt who owns a riding academy in Switzerland, another aunt with a fashion empire in Paris, and then we also later meet another aunt of theirs who owns a bed and breakfast in Wisconsin. And so I just want to know how many aunts these girls have and if they're all wildly successful or if it's just these three. At number 33, we have Barbie's most recent movie as of filming this, and it is Barbie and Teresa: Recipe for Friendship.
I can't wait to hear all about it. Dynamic duo again?
Nope.
So now I feel like we're at the point of this list where I don't exactly hate the movies that we're talking about. Like, this movie isn't a bad movie by any means, but I do also feel like the more recent Barbie movies all kind of blend together, especially because they all exist in this same universe. But in this one, Teresa takes the lead as Barbie and her friends head to New York City to help her cousin with the opening of her new restaurant. Again, this one is also a musical because they're all musicals now. And once again, I didn't really find any of the songs in this movie to be all that memorable. We did get a fun cameo from Rafa in this movie though, and he's a character from Big City, Big Dreams. And honestly, while it was fun to get a movie centered around Teresa, as she has always been one of my favorites, part of me almost felt like Brooklyn kind of stole the show in this one. I loved seeing her with her hair down. That pink dress that she wore in New York City was just stunning, which, speaking of, I did find it funny that once they made it to the city, the only characters that got wardrobe changes were the two Barbies. But we also got to see her home in New York City for the first time as far as the movies are concerned. And then she also had a bit of a moment near the end as she's offered a role on Broadway, which they actually allude to her turning down, which is kind of crazy. Like, I can't imagine turning down a role on Broadway at like 17. But to be fair, they do also leave her decision fairly open-ended. Unfortunately, the Barbies get into another fight in this movie, but I honestly have to give a big props to the voice actors on this one, because that scene where the two Barbies are confronting one another just feels so charged, and I feel like that is thanks to their excellent voice acting. And then we also just have to talk about Teresa's cousin before we move on, because I know that she was injured, but why was this girl not doing anything for the opening of her own restaurant? Where were her employees? Why didn't she have anything ready? And then I felt like she was counting on these random teenagers to do everything for her, and I was just like, why? But other than that, this movie was actually pretty solid, and this is just where it ended up. On to number 32, we have Barbie and her sisters in A Great Puppy Adventure.
We'd best better keep an eye on them there girls and see what they find out.
Oh, sorry, Joe. You said to keep an eye on the girls, and then I only had one left for the hammer in.
This is another one where I'm pretty sure I didn't like it last time, but this time I somewhat enjoyed it. So on a visit to their hometown, Barbie and her sisters find an old treasure map in the attic. This leads them on a journey to find the town founder's hidden treasure. Now, this movie is kind of a big one, as it is the origin story of their puppies. They were given to them by their grandmother, and I actually don't think that we've had a sisters movie since this one that hasn't featured the puppies in some way. This is also the start of them just like roaming around wherever they want without a leash, and so it's really not hard to imagine how Puppy Chase came into fruition. But I do have to give these puppies some props, as at the end of the movie, Barbie's dog Taffy is actually the one who's able to save the day, and it is a pretty cute moment. My favorite thing about this movie is the animation style. I thought that it looked really pretty and unique. And then I definitely talked about this before, but the fact that they talk about their grandfather spending his whole life looking for this treasure, and then these girls are able to find it within the span of a few days, like, that's funny.
One thing that really bugged me though is they kept saying that like Barbie's grandfather worked like his whole life to try to find this treasure and he could never find it. It was such like this thing that he tried so hard to find it and he couldn't find it. But then obviously these kids find it in like the span of this movie. So I'm like, how incompetent was their grandfather that he could not find this treasure that it took them like a couple days to find?
Also, in the end, the girls make the decision to give the treasure back to the town, which was a very nice moment. But at the same time, I was like, they put all the work in, and so I feel like they deserve to get some sort of compensation. Which they do, but then the girls decide to hide it again and make another treasure hunt for someone else to find. Which is fine. I mean, considering the dream house that they live in, they probably don't need the money. Up next, we have Barbie and the Secret Door.
But you're not a fairy or a mermaid. I'm a princess.
This movie follows Princess Alexa, who after discovering a secret door hidden away in her garden, is transported into a magical land where it's up to her to defeat the evil Malusha. Now, this is one that I was definitely ready for. I was ready to reevaluate it and hear 4 different versions of I've Got Magic once again. One thing I wasn't ready for though was the god-awful color palette, which I still find to be quite atrocious.
The thing is, like, every time I think about this movie, it makes me kind of sick for some reason. I think it was just all of the bright colors were a little bit overwhelming for me.
Putting that aside though, for the most part, I do enjoy this one. I definitely related to Princess Alexa as a teen and probably still do a little bit to this day.
She's like a socially awkward princess who likes to read in her room and not socialize with others. Very relatable character.
And then to see her go through this whole journey and become more confident and social by the end of it was really nice. I also like how they kind of hint at her grandmother going through the same journey at the end. And I also didn't hate Malusha. I thought that she was a fine villain and obviously just like a victim of terrible parenting. And I liked how her henchmen were actually decent people and even one of them thanks Alexa in the end. But yeah, overall I feel like this movie maybe gets a bit of a bad rep, but I really didn't think that it was that bad on this rewatch, and for the most part I think it's a fine movie. And then our last, or I guess first, movie for this bottom category is another recent one, which is Barbie and Stacy to the Rescue.
You are amazing! No, I really mean it!
You're amazing!
In this movie, the Roberts family heads to Wisconsin to visit their aunt and also participate in a hot air balloon festival. And I was really looking forward to watching this movie as it was the first one that I hadn't seen yet. And I was excited to see Stacy in the lead as I feel like she is usually the most forgotten Barbie sibling, which I think they maybe took a little bit too literally in this movie as there is one part near the end where they forget her at home. But for the most part, I did enjoy this one. Again, it was a musical when I feel like it really didn't need to be. And the songs in this one definitely used way too much auto-tune. I also feel like these really recent movies definitely give a bit more of like a made-for-TV sort of vibe, which is fine, but it's definitely a bit of a different vibe than I'm used to with the rest of these movies. Also, before we move on, I just have to call out Skipper because she does kind of suck in this movie. She doesn't want to do anything. When they're in the hot air balloon, she's like hanging off the side of it. And then when Barbie says that they need to make their weight lighter, she just throws everything out of the balloon without any rhyme or reason, which was a little bit frustrating to watch. But yeah, for the most part, this movie was cute and I definitely didn't hate it. Up first for the mid-tier, we have a movie that is definitely my favorite in regards to the more recent ones, and that is Barbie and Skipper in The Big Babysitting Adventure.
OMG. Okay, so yeah, that's a mandarin? Duh! I said tangerine!
Now, while I did enjoy this one, I do feel like I have to call out the fact that it is very poorly named. We do get a little bit of babysitting in the beginning, but then we don't actually get to the whole babysitting adventure part until the last 20 minutes of the movie. The synopsis that I would give for the movie is that after Skipper's babysitting business hits a bit of a bump in the road, she begins working at a water park over the summer instead. Now, this is the first movie where Barbie isn't really in it. I know we already talked about the Chelsea and Stacy and Teresa movies, but Barbie was still in those for the most part. Unlike this movie where she's literally in the Amazon planting trees throughout it. But that being said, we do get some Barbie and Ken crumbs in the end. And speaking of Ken, we get to see him as a lifeguard, which is fun. We also get to see 2 new friends of Skipper in this movie who I liked a lot and I would love to have them in doll form. I'm not too sure that they all needed to have money pieces in their hair, but I understand that it was like a group aesthetic that they were going for. Out of all of the newer ones, like I'm talking 2023 to now, I think I would recommend this one the most. On to number 28, we have Barbie Pearl Princess.
Hit me. Hit me!
I don't want to hit you, I want to play cards.
In this movie, we follow Barbie as the mermaid Lumina. She has lived her whole life on a remote reef, but seizes the opportunity to explore the sea after her Aunt Scylla leaves her royal ball invitation at home. Or as I described last time, it's pretty much just Rapunzel but with fish.
This one was actually very good. I was very pleasantly surprised. It's basically like Rapunzel but fish.
So I was really looking forward to rewatching this one as I remembered really liking it last time, and I did enjoy it this time as well. I loved Lumina as as our main character. I also love how she gets a job at one point and just loves it. And then in the end, when everyone helps her defeat the bad guy, I just felt like that showed the real positive impact that she had on people, even after only knowing them for like a day. Of course, I still loved Carla and Fergus as well, and I found their love story to be so adorable. And then I also really liked how Lumina's Aunt Scylla wasn't really the villain and that it was more complex than that. And then there was also the fact that Lumina's family dynamic in the end was just so healthy. Maybe almost unrealistically healthy, just based off of the fact that her parents didn't hold any resentment towards Scylla whatsoever. Because yes, she did save their daughter, but she also kept her from them for years when she probably didn't need to do that. But it's okay, they'll probably just need like a little bit of therapy later on. Up next, we have Barbie and Rockin' Royals.
How could you do this to me? To us? And why are you holding his hand?
If you're not familiar, this one is technically our second Princess and the Pauper adaptation, but it's a very loose adaptation, and I feel like it's only considered as such because we do have two girls switching places once again. So after a mix-up between Camp Pop and Camp Royal causes Princess Courtney and pop star Erica to be enrolled at the wrong camps, both girls then find themselves in the center of a turf war. Obviously, this one is another musical, and it is very heavy on the Camp Rock vibes. What If I Shine is still a goodie in my opinion, and probably my favorite song from this movie, and is very This Is Me coded. I also like how they were able to distinguish between Camp Pop and Camp Royal by having them be an a cappella group, and then this also resulted in a very Pitch Perfect-esque moment. I also loved the number at the end of the movie where both camps join forces, and how they decide to become a band in the end. I thought that that was so sweet. At one point in the movie though, Courtney does tell a story of something she did, but it's the exact same thing we saw Princess Tori do in The Princess and the Pop Star. It was the prank that she pulled on her aunt during Princesses Wanna Have Fun, and so I thought that that was interesting.
Yeah, honestly, I recommend Rockin' Royals. Check that out if you haven't seen it. Rockin' Royals. It was pretty good.
At number 26, we finally have Big City, Big Dreams.
Watch out below!
So I've mentioned this one a few times now, as it's kind of like the catalyst of a lot of other Barbie plot lines. And this is another movie that I did do a review on back when it came out, and so you can go watch that if you'd like. But basically, in this movie, Barbie travels to New York to participate in a performing arts program, and while there, she meets her new best friend, Barbie. Obviously, this one is a musical as well, and I do like the soundtrack for the most part. However, I do still hate Work It with a passion and feel as though it's one of the worst songs that has ever been released. That being said though, I do still really like See You at the Finish Line and Good Vibes, and honestly I feel like I don't really have that much to say about this movie other than it's a good one. And I do still ship the Barbies. I like how Malibu falls asleep on her shoulder on the subway, and the entirety of Before Us is just so adorable. And it's another one that I would recommend checking out if it sounds interesting to you. But moving on, we have another movie that was discussed earlier, and that is Dolphin Magic.
When I realized you'd hacked my device, I reprogrammed it.
This one I think I loved even more last time, as like I said, it was the first movie that I watched, and so I think I was just so excited to get into it. But as I've said, I do still really enjoy this one. So I've kind of spoiled it already, but while on an island vacation with her sisters, Barbie makes a new friend who turns out to be a mermaid.
This is Barbie, this is the mermaid. They're best friends, and I kind of ship them a little bit.
They then work together to help save the captured gemstone dolphins. Once again, I do still love the aesthetic of the movie, and I just feel like the vibes are so on point. And it does still remind me of the Sims 3 Island expansion pack. I also kind of find it funny that Puppy Chase is technically an island adventure movie too, and yet this movie does it so much better. We also get a couple good songs in this movie, Live in the Moment, which I think was also featured in Puppy Chase. And then there's also Treasure, which I don't like as much, but I do enjoy the scene where it's featured in the movie. And now this may make me sound stupid, and I will admit that I don't exactly know much about dolphins, but for the majority of this movie, they were being kept behind this like giant gate, and they try a few times to unlock it and set them free, but then they don't know the code. But then the gate didn't go all the way across, and so I was like, why can't you just like pick them up and put them on the other side? I mean, they're probably pretty heavy, but I still felt like they could have all worked together and figured something out. I don't know. That being said though, I do still really enjoy this movie, even though it is a quote-unquote newer one, and so that's why it's in my top 25. Next, we have the movie that came after Dolphin Magic, which is Princess Adventure.
Hey! What do you think you're doing?
Escaping!
Now, this movie was kind of a big deal at the time as it was our first movie back after the Barbie movie hiatus, as Dolphin Magic came out in 2017 and then we didn't get Princess Adventure until 2020. And before that, Barbie was putting out movies every year, sometimes multiple movies in a year. But funnily enough, during this hiatus was when I posted my original video, and so I thought I was doing it at the perfect time because I just assumed that they were done making them. But then in came Princess Adventure and the rest is history. So this was our fourth attempt at a Princess and the Pauper remake. After noticing that her and Barbie look identical, Princess Amelia invites her along with all of her friends to the castle so that the two of them can switch places for the week. And honestly, if you are a classic Barbie movie fan, I would recommend checking this one out. While it obviously is more of a modern movie, I do still feel like it has a bit of that classic feel, which I really appreciate. This one is a musical as well, but it is one where I feel like it actually makes sense that it's a musical. I feel like the songs do a good job of moving the plot along, and there is a decent amount of them as well. I personally love King of the Kingdom. I don't care what anyone says. If you hate that song, you hate fun, because I just don't understand how anyone could not have a good time when that song comes on. The reprise is also really good and does give off some Preminger vibes in my opinion. Obviously, you can't really compare Prince Johann to Preminger, but I do feel like he does hold his own in this movie. I also did a review of this one back when the movie came out, and I believe in that video I do say where I would have ranked it in my original list. I might have to check out that as well. At number 23, we have Barbie in the Pink Shoes.
Your Majesty, if we had known you were coming, we could have— Giselle is gone, ma'am.
Gone! Gone where?
To the market for buckets.
I think this might be a little bit lower than where I ranked the movie on my first watch, because I remember really liking this movie the last time I watched it, whereas this time, I don't know, I did still like it, but definitely not as much. This one follows a ballerina named Kristen, who after putting on a pair of magical pink ballet shoes is transported into the realm of ballet. First of all, I love that we finally made it to a ballet movie. I feel like ballet is just prime Barbie movie core, and I really miss it in regards to the more recent Barbie movies. I loved the opening ballet rehearsal scene. I thought that looked so pretty, as well as the opening dance we get with the Kellys, as that just felt so reminiscent to those earlier movies as well. This movie is not a musical, but we do get one really great song in it called Keep On Dancing, which I still love so much. And then there's also just something so special about getting to hear the music from Swan Lake in this movie, but I do wish that they could have paid more of an homage to the original Barbie Swan Lake in this movie. I understand that they were doing their own thing, but also like how hard would it have been for them to like put her in Odette's dress or something. I mentioned this last time as well, but I still don't know why Brett Dyer is in this, but as I was a huge Jane the Virgin fan in high school, I am definitely not complaining. I also love the fact that Giselle was included in this movie, as that then went on to become my personal favorite ballet, and then of course the princes from Giselle are just top tier comic relief in this movie. Lastly, I do have to mention the fact that I do feel like they picked the wrong style of dance to go along with their message of the movie. I'm all for dancing with your heart and making up your own choreography, but they literally picked the most strict and most disciplined style of dance to go with that message. You don't exactly get to do whatever you want as a ballerina. I actually think following the choreography to a T is a big part of that, but that's just as far as I'm aware. Moving on, I definitely feel like we're at the really good ones now, as up next we have Barbie Starlight Adventure.
Oh, the door won't open.
This movie is so very fun. I loved it the first time I watched it, and I loved it again upon this rewatch. If you're not familiar, this one was like Barbie's first sci-fi movie, and in it, she is chosen by the King's Council to join a team that is needed to venture into the center planet and stop the stars from going out. Now, this movie is very different, and so I feel like you have to go into it with an open mind. But that being said, it is also so pretty. I love all of the planets and the stars and the animals. There are so many like breathtaking shots in this movie, honestly. Once again, it's not a musical, but there are a few good songs in it, like Shooting Star, for example. We also get the Nutcracker Suite, I believe, during the ballroom scenes, which is fun. And interestingly enough, this movie doesn't really have a villain, which I thought was fine. Like, I don't even think that the movie really needed one. My only complaint is that we're never really told what would happen if the stars go out, like why that is such a bad thing. Obviously, I can draw my own conclusions on that and why it would be bad, but I still feel like I would have appreciated an in-universe reason for that. Other than that, I love this movie and it will probably always be one of my favorites. Next up, we have Barbie Epic Road Trip.
Woo! When you flip the script, Flip the script. Daddy's gonna flip the script.
Now, this one is kind of a tricky one. If you're not familiar, this movie was an interactive movie that was released on Netflix. And I say was because it has since been removed as Netflix somewhat recently took down all of their interactive content. Which is really unfortunate because I really liked this movie. It was basically like a choose your own adventure sort of thing. We have both of the Barbies, Skipper and Ken, heading out on a road trip where you get to decide what happens next. And it was a pretty significant movie as it was the first one where our current versions of Barbie and Ken finally got together. Something that we have been waiting to happen ever since 2015. And obviously, I thought that they executed it perfectly. I mean, this is my highest ranked quote-unquote recent movie for a reason. I loved the interactive element. It really keeps you engaged and makes you feel like you're a part of this big moment. And it also means that the movie can be different every single time that you watch it as there are various different choices and outcomes. There's also a song in this movie, Flip the Script, which I think is quite good. And Ken is honestly just perfection in this movie. I love how he knows all of her favorite foods and how excited he is about his bucket list. The support that he gives her to help her get her audition back, even if it means that she might end up in New York forever, was just perfect. And honestly, this movie just felt like a rom-com to me, which is exactly what I would want it to be, which is also the whole point of the movie. Like, it could be something completely different for you based off of your own choices. But as I said, the unfortunate part is that this movie is no longer available on streaming. There are other ways to watch it online, which I was able to find for this video, but what sucks is that it's just all of the choices smushed together in this big long thing. And so you kind of have to jump around to find the right timeline to go along with the choices that you've made, and if you've never seen the movie before, I assume that that's a lot easier said than done. Luckily for me, I had a lot of my favorite scenes saved because of my recent Barbie movie ship video, and so I was able to watch those, but eventually I do hope that Netflix does give us this movie back in its original format because it is just so good, and if not, it will be forever missed, at least as far as I'm concerned. But with that, it is now time for our top 20, and up first we have Barbie in a Mermaid Tale 2.
What is it? It's a seashell.
Now, if memory serves, I believe I ranked this one higher than the original one last time, and as you can tell, that is not the case this time around. Similarly to Mariposa, I just completely fell in love with Mermaid Tale on this rewatch, but basically after the evil heiress escapes her whirlpool prison, Merlia must join forces with her biggest surfing competitor to stop her and save Oceana once again. And even though I did feel like this one was a pretty solid sequel, I do feel like we didn't actually get into what the movie was about until we were already like halfway through it. But I did love hearing Queen of the Waves again and the return of Kelly Sheridan as Barbie. I also thought Alistar was a great addition as a villain sidekick. Also, it takes place in Australia, which was a fun location that we hadn't seen yet for a Barbie movie. But I will say that I did feel like the animation in this movie did feel a bit lazier in comparison to the first one, but that could have just been me. And I really wasn't too sure how I felt about the whole Marilia ceremony. I kind of liked that her mom was the only one that was able to create it in the previous movie, and I feel like I would have liked if that was passed on to Merlia in another way. But I did love seeing her in the end spinning it while she was surfing. I thought that that was really neat. But yeah, overall this one really is not a bad sequel. I just personally love the first one even more. Up next we have Barbie: A Fairy Secret.
No. I don't want to marry Graciela. I'm in love with someone else.
Kevin! How could you say such a thing? And on our wedding day?
This is another one that I just remember loving the first time I watched it, and I did still really enjoy it this time around, just not as much. And this one is kind of like a sequel as well, as it takes place in the same universe as Fashion Fairy Tale.
Where it's like Barbie is in the movie as Barbie, and she's the same Barbie that is the actress in like the most of these movies except for the sisters one, because I guess those are not really actress movies. I don't know, the Barbie universe is confusing.
But basically, when Ken gets captured by fairies and taken to the fairy realm to wed Princess Graciela, it is up to Barbie and Raquel to work together to save him. Now, there is a lot of things about this movie that I love. It's got a good song. I liked a lot of the fairy things, like how they use fitting rooms as portals. Everything that was going on during Ken's scenes were hilarious. And I also really appreciated the conflict that they had between Graciela and her two friends. The whole thing was that she felt as though they became closer and kind of cut her out, which I found to be a very real thing that kids go through with their friends, especially in groups of 3. And so I felt like that conflict was handled really well, and I really appreciated their resolution. I did find it interesting though that Barbie had a hard time believing in this whole fairy realm when in the previous movie she was working alongside fairies. All in all, I do love this one, and I'm sad that it is only one of 2 meta movies that we got. On to number 18, we finally have another Christmas movie, as up next is Barbie in A Christmas Carol.
You're not my Aunt Marie. You're not even a ghost at all.
Not a ghost? I am floating 2 feet off the ground. How much ghostlier do you want me to be?
Now, I feel like I've often gotten some slack from you guys for not valuing this movie in the way that I should. And honestly, after this rewatch, I think that you guys might be right. Like, this movie is a good one. It's a retelling of The Christmas Carol, and so you're probably familiar with the concept. But basically, after seeing how selfish she's grown up to be, Eden's aunt sends her 3 spirits the night before Christmas to help her change her ways. Starting right from the top, this was the first movie to return back to the Barbie storytelling format, which was very much appreciated as far as I'm concerned. Although I do think that that premise could have been worked on a little bit. The whole thing is that they have to go to this charity Christmas ball and Kelly is holding them back because she doesn't want to go. And so Barbie was in a rush a second ago, but now she has all the time in the world to sit down and tell her sister the entirety of A Christmas Carol. In regards to the spirits, I definitely think that the Christmas past girly got the best dress. And then I also liked how in the end of the movie, when we see her Aunt Marie waving to her, it shows that she is now free of her chains. I also still love Catherine, and I wish that we got a doll for her. I actually have seen that there were mock-ups made, and then it just never came into fruition, which is so disappointing. But of course, I still love her and Eden as well. I love that she is the only one that still has hope that the Eden that she knows is still in there. I mean, she is the one who saw her trauma firsthand, and so it makes sense that she would understand more than anyone else, but still I feel like that's a lot easier said than done. I also must say that I absolutely stand by my low ranking of Catherine and that other guy. I can't even remember his name, and I completely forgot about his crush on her by the time we got to the end of the movie. At number 17, we have Barbie and the Three Musketeers.
Another ball. Your last. As prince, your next will be as king.
So I mean, this movie is just a classic, and it honestly hurts that I had to put it in this category and not the next one. And in case you're not familiar, although I highly doubt it, this movie follows a young Corinne as she travels to Paris to fulfill her lifelong dream of being a musketeer. There are some good songs in this movie as well, mainly All for One. I also love Miette. I thought that she was adorable. Also, Tim Curry makes his grand Barbie movie villain return as he voices Philippe. And I must say, although he only did 2, he is just such a good Barbie movie villain. Like, his voice fits perfectly. Also, while we're talking about villains, I feel like it must be said that there are just so many, like, awful men in this movie. There's the one guy who knew her father, who I loved at first, but then when Corinne messes up, he pretty much tells her that her dead father would be disappointed in her. And then we've talked about this time and time again, but the prince in this movie also wasn't great. The man goes as far as to laugh in her face after she tells him that she wants to be a musketeer, moments after she literally just saved his life. But it is a girl power movie anyways, and so I guess the male characters don't really matter at the end of the day. What really matters is our 4 musketeers and just how awesome these girls were. I love how they all had their own niche, one of them being into fashion, the other one being an actress, and then the third girl is a violinist. Corinne didn't really have anything else going for her now that I think of it, but she was like the leader of the pack, and so I guess that was her thing. Once again, I'm sad that this movie didn't make it into my top 15, but I do think that I have done it justice in comparison to where I ranked it last time. But with all that being said, we have finally made it to our last movie in our mid-tier, and it is Barbie Fairytopia Magic of the Rainbow.
Bibble, come on. We're going to our room.
Obviously, this is our 3rd installment in the Fairytopia series, and in this one, Alina is chosen to be Azura's apprentice, and now she must train along with the other apprentices to perform the annual Flight of Spring. Now, this movie came a little bit after my time, and I feel like because of that, I've always viewed it as like the one Fairytopia movie that's not as good, but after doing this rewatch, I don't really think I agree with that anymore. I now feel like it's just as good as the other 2, and that the Fairytopia series as a whole is like this warm blanket blanket that you can always come back to. Of course, we've got Bibble in this one, and so that's an automatic win. Seeing him in his little sleep cap was just everything to me. And he also gets his own little love story in this movie as well, as he meets another puffball, Dizzle. I also feel like I've said this before, but I do still feel like this movie is very like Harry Potter-esque, as they're all off at this school and they're training to hone their magic. I also loved their dorm rooms. They were so beautiful, how they were in that big tree with the flowers. This movie also made me realize that Dandelion, Alina's best friend, really never gets to do anything. She doesn't go along on any of the journeys with her. Well, I guess she tried in the first movie, but then that didn't really work out well. And so instead, she just ends up being this friend that we always see at the beginning and at the end of these movies. And speaking of the people that never do anything, neither does the Enchantress. In her defense, she is usually captured too soon to be able to help, but still, I'm like, if you're like the leader of Fairytopia, at least do something. I don't know. Okay, so we have finally reached our top 15 and I'm so excited to jump right into it. These are the movies where I feel like if you're going to be talking about the best Barbie movies of all time, most if not all of these are going to be a part of the conversation. But I will admit that in regards to my first pick, my bias definitely plays into this ranking. And maybe it should have been in the previous category, but I just couldn't bring myself to do so. But without further ado, at number 15, we have The Barbie Diaries.
I heard about Raquel dumping you. I mean, about your breakup.
Ow.
Now, obviously, this one is a bit of a tonal shift in comparison to the other movies that came out around this time. And while I did penalize Thumbelina for basically the exact same thing, in regards to this one, I honestly found it to be a breath of fresh air. But basically, determined to make her sophomore year memorable, Barbie decides to do a news story on the popular crowd in hopes that she will be chosen as news anchor. If you're not familiar, during the time that this movie came out, the Bratz franchise was on the rise, and they were basically giving Mattel a run for their money. And so this was one of many of Mattel's responses to that, and little Caitlin just ate up every bit of it. Obviously, the animation in this movie is quite different in comparison to the others, and arguably the worst one that we've seen, but I personally just think that it adds to the charm of the movie. I love the Y2K fashion in this one, and the soundtrack, or at least the songs that Barbie's band sings in the movie. I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit this, but when I was little, I used to play the opening song from this movie, This Is Me, and ride around on my scooter pretending like I was Barbie. Now, I will admit that the plot for this movie isn't exactly its strong suit. At one point, I think I was about 15 minutes in and I felt like absolutely nothing had happened, and then I couldn't for the life of me remember what the actual plot of this movie was supposed to be. And it honestly makes me wonder if they were just like, let's make a movie with Barbie in high school, and then they just listed off the things that they needed to include in said movie, because I feel like there are just so many classic teen movie tropes that are just thrown into this movie. All of that being said though, this movie is still very special and nostalgic for me, and so I just knew that it would end up being fairly high on this list. Moving on to number 14, we have Barbie and the Diamond Castle.
But in the end, the girls escaped.
Quiet, I'm thinking.
Ooh, that's good. You go right ahead. Think away.
Now, I really hope that I'm rectifying something here, because if memory serves, I don't think I did this movie justice last time around. And I think I did explain myself in the fact that when I was a kid, I absolutely hated this movie.
Growing up, I hated this movie, even though I had never seen it. I think it was probably just because like I was sad that I didn't enjoy Barbie movies as much as I used to. I don't know, or I was growing up and didn't want to like them anymore. I don't know.
So no matter what they put out, I probably would have hated it. But now as an adult, I can look at this movie and appreciate it for the classic that it is. So we follow our two leads, Alexa and Liana, who after discovering a mirror with a girl trapped inside, find themselves on a journey to uncover the Diamond Castle before the evil Lydia finds it for herself. This is another movie where we begin with that Barbie storytelling format, although this time she is telling the story to Stacy instead of Kelly, although she is voiced by the same person, so not much has really changed. This movie is also another musical, and I feel like there are so many iconic Barbie movie songs in this movie. My personal favorite is We're Gonna Find It.
Although I'm still confused about Connected as to if it's a cover or not, because it was also in Aquamarine. And so I'm just forever confused about that song.
Now, I think I complained about this last time, but if not, something that I've never really been too crazy about in regards to this movie is the color palette. When I think about this movie, it just makes me think about those like dark but yet vibrant colors, and that's just not really my cup of tea. But after this rewatch, it got me thinking about that darkness and why it was necessary for plot reasons. Because Lydia has actually taken away all of the light from this universe. And then we see in the end, after Lydia is defeated, that everything lights up again, and I honestly think that that's kind of genius, and I'm kind of upset with myself for not noticing that earlier. But at the end of the day, I think that the main heart of this movie is that relationship between Alexa and Liana, although I really found myself on this watch appreciating the friendship that they develop with Melody as well. I feel like I may be disappointing some people by not having this movie in my top 10, but like, let's respect it for the jump that it did make in comparison to where it was originally, and who knows, maybe we'll get there one day. At number 13, we have Barbie Princess Charm School.
You stepped on 8 of my toes. I only have 4 left.
2. You have 2 left.
That's even worse.
And this is another one where I definitely feel like I'm righting some wrongs here in regards to this ranking. For some reason, I really remember disliking Princess Charm School the last time that I watched it, whereas this time I was just like, I don't know what was wrong with me in 2019 because this movie is simply iconic. If you're not familiar, basically Blair, our lead, wins a lottery that allows her to attend Princess Charm School. She then quickly comes to learn that being a lady royal is a lot harder than she expected.
And I really liked the concept of it. It really reminded me of like The Selection, sort of, or like Hunger Games, but like without all the killing and like princesses instead.
There's a couple great songs in this movie as well, like You Can Tell She's a Princess and On Top of the World. And I also at one point noticed Isla humming the song from A Fairy Secret, and so that was a fun Easter egg. Overall, there are just so many things about this movie that I loved this time around. I loved the attention to detail by having their royal family on their money, and this isn't really something that is unique to Princess Charm School, but I really liked the transitions that they used in this era. We saw it in this movie as well as Fashion Fairy Tale. I loved a lot of the background shots in this movie, particularly that one when they have their dance class with the princes. Those big windows with the snow falling outside, like that was just so pretty. And then of course, Delancey's character development was just so good. She might actually be my favorite character from this movie because of that. I also found it funny just how little Blair knew about the royal family and their history, but I guess it worked out for plot reasons. And to top it all off, I even got a little emotional at the ending. This movie is just so fun, and I'm honestly a little bit jealous of those who got to grow up watching it. Moving on to number 12, we have Mariposa.
I swear, Gastros, if you are behind what happened to my mother...
No, Your Highness, I promise you, I only want her to be well.
Now, I am just so excited to talk about this movie, as like I mentioned earlier, I just fell in love with it after this rewatch. And honestly, part of me does feel like it is a little bit underrated. So when the Queen of Flutterfield is poisoned, Prince Carlos enlists the help of Mariposa to venture beyond their kingdom and find the antidote. Now, this is kind of our last movie from the Fairytopia universe, that is if you don't count the sequel to Mariposa, which I personally don't. But that means that we do get to see some of Alina and Bibble, as Alina is actually telling the story to Bibble. And speaking of Bibble, while I was watching this movie, at one point my fiance came in and he was like, why is Bibble in this? Wasn't one movie enough? And so I went, first of all, he's in 4 movies, and second, what is it with men and hating Bibble? Like, I feel like I'm constantly hearing about people's boyfriends just like not understanding Bibble, and I'm just like, why? Like, what's so hard to understand? And I did talk about this already, but I like that since we already had Kelly voicing Alina, we had Chiara voice Mariposa. And I just loved hearing her voice as the lead this time around, and I really do feel like she just embodies Mariposa. I really love how they made the butterfly fairy species seem like smaller in comparison to the others, and they did this with the doll as well, I feel like. And of course, the color palette from this movie is one of my absolute favorites out of all of them. I also loved Zinzi. I feel like if I watched this movie when I was 6, I would have been all about her. She also at one point sacrifices herself and takes on the Skeezites for them, and so I feel like that alone deserves my respect. I also love how Mariposa goes on this whole journey with these 2 girls that she works for who are kind of obnoxious, but then have some decent character development by the end of the movie. At first I had wished that she had just gone on this journey with Willa instead, but then it made for so much more of an interesting dynamic by not doing that. And then I also appreciated seeing what her and Carlos were up to back in Flutterfield. Again, they were definitely planning for a sequel with this one, and it wasn't the one that we got, and I'm kind of sad that that will never see the light of day. Coming in at number 11, we have Barbie Fashion Fairy Tale.
Oh, you're a designer. So you must know Millicent. Millicent?
This is another one that I think made a bit of a jump on this iteration of the list because I cannot for the life of me remember where I ranked it to begin with. As I mentioned earlier, this movie is the first meta Barbie movie, as it's the first one where they break the fourth wall and Barbie actually plays herself as an actor. So heartbroken after being fired from her movie and dumped by her boyfriend Ken, Barbie travels to Paris to visit her Aunt Millicent, who is a fashion designer. This movie is another one that has a great soundtrack, and as this movie is about fashion, we have to talk about the wardrobe. I absolutely loved Elise and everything that she designed. I also ended up shipping her and Barbie a little bit, which I definitely wasn't expecting, but I also really loved Barbie's yellow raincoat paired with the pink boots. The first black dress that we see when she gets to Millicent's is so pretty, and also both of the girls' second fits I just loved. Ken is also great in this movie. The edited breakup call to Barbie is just so funny, and I just love how hard he works to get all the way to Paris and make this grand gesture for her. There's also this one part of the movie where Barbie directly references playing Corinne in The Three Musketeers, and that might actually be my favorite part in this entire movie. There's also one line in this movie where Aunt Millicent says that if your audience doesn't like what you're doing, then it makes no sense to keep doing it. And having that line in this movie where it was the first one where they made a big change to the Barbie movie franchise made me wonder if it was about more than just fashion designing. Either way, I really love this movie and it was very close to making my top 10. But with that being said, let's get into the movies that did. So up first we have Barbie Fairytopia.
I think I have to go to Fairy Town. What?
Now I feel like it's not very surprising that I would have Fairytopia in my top 10. It's honestly a classic and it is super nostalgic for me. I do think that 7-year-old Caitlin would probably have this one in her top 5, but things change. And I feel like we all know the story, but basically after an evil potion gets spread across Fairytopia, causing all the plants to die and things that fly to get sick, a young wingless fairy must go on a journey to save their land and everyone in it. First of all, I love the pastel color palette used in this movie, as well as the bright pinks and all the sparkles. A lot of the landscape shots in this movie too, I just found to be so stunning. Also worth noting, this was Barbie's first attempt at a completely original story, like it's not based off of a ballet or any other pre-existing works, and so I feel like it definitely deserves some props for that. And it also deserves some props for not only having Bibble in it, but for also being the origin of him. The Barbie franchise just would not be what it is today without Bibble, in my opinion. I also love Hugh, Dandelion, Azura, and Dahlia. The ending of this movie is just so iconic as well, with the defeat of Laverna and the rainbow and the Guardians, and like, it kind of made me emotional, I'm not gonna lie. The moment where she gets her wings in the end too is just perfection, and they were also just so pretty. And yeah, I'm honestly surprised that I don't have even more to say about this movie. It's an OG and I love it, and I will forever love it for the rest of my days. Coming in at number 9 might be a little shocking, or at least it was for me because I was not expecting to love this movie so much, but it is of course Barbie in A Mermaid Tale.
A talking dolphin, breathing underwater, and mysterious pink hair? There is something deep and intense going on here.
Yes, like a deep, intense concussion.
So this movie follows our girl Merlia, who after discovering that she is part mermaid and that her mother is the rightful ruler of Oceania, she must venture underwater and fulfill her destiny of defeating the evil heiress. And now that I'm thinking about it, it does make sense that I have this movie here, as it is very reminiscent of Fairytopia. In each of these movies, you have these two girls who are sent on these journeys to save their worlds, and they're both different in some way. Alina by not having wings, and Merlia idea by not having a tail. This movie was their first of their first rebrand, and I honestly found this transition to be a little bit bittersweet, but luckily this movie is good and so it makes up for it. We've got a great song in this one with Queen of the Waves, which you can honestly consider me a fan of now, but I also really loved the score in this movie. I found the music to be so fitting with a movie that mainly takes place underwater, and a lot of the instrumentals actually reminded me of the show H2O, which makes sense as they are both mermaid related. Merlia as a character I loved. I love how her mom basically named her after the life force of the sea, and I also loved how unfazed she was after her hair magically changed color. She was able to breathe underwater and talk to a dolphin. But then I also appreciated how in denial she was with everything that her grandfather was saying, because I feel like it made it a bit more realistic. And it also just totally made sense that this teenager wanted everything to just go back to normal. And then in the end, when she does decide to stay and take on Eris, it makes that moment that much more important. But then I also like how throughout her journey, she has to really embrace who she is to get to that moment. And so yeah, I can definitely say that this is another movie that I love so much more now than I did before. And then moving on to number 8, we have Barbie in the Nutcracker.
May I say you're looking specially regal this evening, sire?
First of all, I cannot believe that we finally made it here to the OG Barbie movie. I feel like we all know the story for this one, but in the off chance that you don't, after being shrunken down to the size of a toy soldier, a young Clara must venture into another realm to find the one person that can change her back to her true size, which is the Sugar Plum Princess. Now, like I said, this one is the OG, and so I feel like if nothing else, it at least needs to be respected for starting a legacy. Obviously, this one is based off of the ballet, and so we get a lot of dance sequences in this movie. I particularly love the ballet storytelling intro with Barbie and Kelly, as well as of course the final dance numbers with King Candy and Major Mint, and of course Barbie as the Sugar Plum Princess and the Prince is just one of the most iconic dance sequences out of all of the movies. There are just so many characters from this movie that I love. Captain Candy, Major Mint, Prince Eric. I also love the snow and garden fairies. There is just something about those early Barbie movie Kellys and their design that truly just like scratch my brain in the right way. We also have Tim Curry voicing the Mouse King, which is just so very iconic and he does a perfect job. And it just wouldn't be right to talk about this movie without giving Clara and Eric their flowers, as those two are just the definition of romance for me. I will always bring up that treehouse scene whenever I'm talking about this movie and their love story because it is just so iconic. How quickly she's able to call him out for being the prince, and also just like how pretty that shot is, which speaking of, a lot of the landscape shots from this movie are really pretty despite the really early animation. I also love how early on we get foreshadowing into the fact that Clara is the Sugar Plum Princess, like how when they're leaving the snow cave and flowers start to grow from her footprints. And then lastly, I just have to bring this up because I feel like I never understood before how Eric was able to get into the real world and if everything that had happened was just a dream or not. But in the end, they literally both look to the owl who was their guide, and so it was probably her. I'm honestly not too sure how it took me so long to put 2 and 2 together there, but at least I got there eventually. And then we unfortunately have our last Fairytopia movie to talk about, and that is Mermaidia.
A sand crab in the hand is worth 2 in the shell.
Now this is our second movie in the series, and I believe I ranked it highest out of all of them last time as well. And that is simply because it is the best one, and I will not be taking criticism of that fact. In this one, Alina is sent on a journey to save Prince Nalu and all of Mermaidia with the help of an unlikely friend. First of all, once again, the landscapes in this movie are as pretty as ever. And just like with Mermaid Tale as well, the soundtrack in this movie while they're underwater is also just so pretty. As you guys know, I absolutely love Alina and Nori. That race scene that they have in the beginning is probably one of my favorite scenes out of the entire movie. And I also love later on when we see that they have matching girlfriend mermaid tattoos. Now, Bibble might arguably be at his peak in this movie. I loved seeing him do the little doggy paddle. And also the voice changing Barry scene was iconic and just peak comedy to me as a child. Now, I must admit that not much really happens in this movie. They're basically just going around to different people and asking them if they know where Nalu is. But honestly, that's okay, and I'm here for the journey, not the destination. And it's also worth it because this movie gives us the lefting leftaroo scene, which I couldn't not bring up. Moving on to number 6, we have Barbie as the island princess.
She's different from any girl I've met before. Clearly.
Now, I definitely know that this movie must have made quite the jump, as it is one that I didn't grow up with. I was just on the cusp of no longer watching Barbie movies anymore at the time when it came out, which is why it probably didn't make it into my top 10 last time. But this time around, there honestly wasn't going to be a timeline in which the island princess wasn't this high up. So after a shipwreck leaves a young Rose stranded on a deserted island, she grows up alone amongst the animals. Years later, a prince arrives and she decides to go back with him to civilization. This movie was our first musical since The Princess and the Pauper, and in my opinion, it does not disappoint. I Need to Know is honestly one of the best songs from our generation, and while I do stand by my previous opinion that that's really the only elite song from this movie, the rest of them are still good as well as far as a musical is concerned. There's a bunch of them, they further the plot and sometimes offer more of an explanation as to what the characters are going through or feeling, which is what I feel like a musical number should be used for. There's also a lot of memorable animals in this movie. I love Azul and I love Soggy and the way he runs. This may be an odd thing to bring up, but I wish that we got to see more of Luciana's cat Pearl because I didn't even remember that she had one. I love Ariana's mice and their banger song, but with all of the good also comes the bad, and so Tika is also just like as terrifying as ever. This rewatch also just reminded me how terrible and incredibly selfish she is. That part where Ro is like, wow, everybody's like me, and then Tika's like, but nobody's like me, like, oh my god, shut up, like she's so awful. And then how she steals Antonio's note and then bursts into tears on the boat. Like, this girl pisses me off so much. I have no idea how she hasn't been enemy number one for me all along. Now, in regards to Antonio, I've definitely been a little bit wishy-washy with him in the past, but I will say that I love just how wholeheartedly he falls for Ro, and the fact that he gives his throne to his sisters so that he can be with her and does this like without a second thought is everything to me. I also love Ro, and I feel like she makes for a great protagonist. I just found her to be such a kind and selfless person, and I love how they made so many smart choices with her character, like how her falling off the ship triggers her repressed trauma, and the parallel with Rose saving that bird in the beginning and then her mom doing the same at the end. And then also Luciana, I feel like everybody praises her, but it's deserved because she's great and I love her. Overall, this movie is another genuinely good one, and one where I'm jealous of those who did grow up watching it.
I also really like how in the back of this disc it says Barbie talks and sings with the animals. So, what's not to love?
But moving on to number 5, we have the icon that is Barbie as Rapunzel.
Ooh, she sure got mad at somebody. I wouldn't want to be in his boots.
Or his head.
Now, I am sad to say that I do think that this one has moved back a bit in regards to my previous ranking, but honestly, this is just where it felt right for me this time around. So this one is pretty straightforward, but after being held captive her whole life, Rapunzel discovers a magical paintbrush gifted to her by her parents. With it, she is able to escape and discover the world around her for the very first time. First of all, the music in this movie is just so good, the instrumentals as well as Constant as the Stars Above. I love the color palette with the pastel purples and all of the flowers. I also love all of the painting elements in this movie with the intro, and how it ends with the couple walking on the beach in her painting. Once again, we've got a lot of great animals in this movie. Otto is just hilarious, and Penelope will always have my heart. I love how they gave her this complicated relationship with her dad and how far they come by the end of the movie, and how she is this like clumsy but cute sort of gentle giant. And I know that her voice actor is a fairly iconic one and has been in so many things, but for me, she will just forever be Penelope. We also have a great love story in this one with Rapunzel and Stefan, and I will never miss the opportunity to bring up their meet cute when he perfectly wraps his hands around her waist. The Rapunzel let your hair down scene being a dream sequence was like revolutionary to me as a child. And then not to mention Mother Gothel as the villain is just so good. She is scary but also cunning, and that ending when she is trapped in her own spell is just so iconic. Moving on to number 4, we have Barbie and the 12 Dancing Princesses.
Don't make me wish I kept the horse instead of you.
Never mind. Forget I'm even here.
So I feel like this movie might be a lot of people's #1, and I definitely respect that as it is in my top 5. And I'm sure we all know the plot for this one, but after King Randolph is told that his daughters aren't quote-unquote proper princesses, he enlists the help of his cousin, Duchess Rowena, to give them etiquette lessons. However, the Duchess turns out to be a tyrant who represses the girls' creativity and puts them on a harsh schedule. First of all, the 12 Dancing Princesses suite might take the crown for being one of the best instrumentals out of all of these movies. I mean, the vocals and just everything about it is just so incredibly stunning. But then we also get Shine in the credits, which is another one of my all-time favorite Barbie songs. I also love every single one of the princesses in this movie, and the fact that they have so many cameos in the other Barbie movies. I love how they named each of them in alphabetical order from A to L, and how they gave each of them their own personality and interests. I personally was just obsessed with Lacey growing up, and I do think that she is still just as adorable as ever. And then how in the end of the movie they're all able to use their skills that Rowena tried to repress to defeat her is just perfection. We also have to talk about Genevieve and Derek, as those two were just made for each other. The ending where they're able to escape the dance pavilion by dancing together is still so very iconic and honestly makes me a little bit emotional to watch, no matter how many times I've seen the movie. Also, Derek is just such a great Ken character, and I really hope I did him justice in that video as well. I mean, he has a talking bird, can play the flute, and he gives up his horse for her. Not to mention, he also scales the side of a building for her and is able to figure out where she is based off of shoe polish. So yeah, this movie is just so nostalgic. It's another one with a really great and memorable aesthetic, and I just love it so very much. But now it is time for #3, which is Barbie of Swan Lake.
I'm not brave like you.
Well, that's true. Nobody's braver than I, but I suppose I could help you.
So this is another very iconic one that I feel like should always be in the conversation if you are discussing the top Barbie movies. Of course, it centers a young Odette who, after following a unicorn into the enchanted forest, comes to find out that she is the chosen one. She must defeat the evil Rothbard and put an end to his wicked tyranny.
It's basically like the ballet. I think I've never seen it, but I assume that's what it's like since it's based off of that.
Now, I do have a bit of an update as I have finally had the chance to see Swan Lake the ballet for the very first time. And now that I have, I am finally aware of all of the creative liberties that were taken with this movie. And if you ever get the chance to see it for yourself and expect a happy ending, a unicorn, and a fairy queen, let me just say that you've been warned. Now, something that I'm sure you can tell by now is very important to me, as I've brought this up numerous times throughout the video, but it is aesthetic. The sparkly pastels and the pinks and blues in this movie just cannot be matched. The enchanted forest scenery is just so stunning. The nighttime forest date that Odette and Daniel go on might be one of the prettiest things that I've ever seen in my entire life, and I'm not even exaggerating. I also mentioned this a while ago, but I just have to reiterate that I absolutely love the music from Swan Lake. It just fits it so perfectly and is just so beautiful and nostalgic for me. Once again, there are so many characters in this movie that I just love. Lila, all of the Kellys as elves, Odile, and also Rothbart, if I'm honest. I think that he is without a doubt the best Barbie movie villain as far as the first 3 movies are concerned. Obviously, this movie is very loosely based off of the ballet, as I mentioned, and so we do get a lot of great dance sequences in this movie as well. I particularly love the sequence where they're all helping Odette get ready for the ball, and then also, of course, the scene where Daniel is dancing with Odile, and then she's switching between herself and Odette. Surprisingly, I actually don't have much else to say about this movie, probably just because I've seen it so many times, but it will always be just such a special movie to me, and I love it so very much. But with all that being said, it is now time for my #2, our runner-up, and that is, of course, Barbie as the Princess and the Pauper. I'm kidding, you guys know that's not my #2. That spot is reserved for the one and only Magic of Pegasus.
The gem of ice is somewhere up there. I can feel it.
And can you feel how we get there?
So I feel like this movie has gone viral a few times for its somewhat insane plot, but in my opinion, that's part of what makes it so good. Basically, when everyone she knows and loves is turned into stone by the evil Wenlock, Princess Annika must go on a journey to find all of the pieces needed to create the magical Wand of Light, and then with it, she can defeat Wenlock once and for all. First of all, we have another iconic score in this movie. That opening scene with her skating is just so perfect and nostalgic for me, mainly because of the music. And then on top of that, we also have the incredible Hope Has Wings in the credits. Another thing that I feel like this movie is most well known for is having the best Barbie and Ken ship with Annika and Aiden. Their banter and enemies to lovers story arc is just so good. From the moment that they meet one another in the Forbidden Forest to the end when they're skating together in Cloud Kingdom, like every step of the way, I am just hooked. I also love how we see them introduce one another to their parents, and that scene where they're skating into Wenlock's castle is just perfection. Also, hot take maybe a little bit, but I also love Shiver, even though I am aware that she can be very annoying. I just loved her so much as a kid that I feel like I can't betray her, and I still find her to be quite adorable. I also never noticed this before, but at one point we actually see her wearing Annalise's crown and necklace, which I thought was a fun Easter egg. We also have to talk about Wenlock, as I do think that he is in the conversation as being one of the best Barbie movie villains. First of all, the fact that his name is literally Wenlock, which sounds like wedlock, is just so iconic. I've also definitely talked about this before, but he does have 2 different colored eyes, which I've always really liked about his character design. But this is also the first time that I think that I've noticed that after he's defeated and turns back into like a regular guy, his eyes also turn back to just being brown. So I just love the fact that he like did that to himself to make himself look cooler. I also probably sound like a broken record at this point, but this movie is another just like gorgeous one. The fact that they had all of the Kellys painting these sunrises and sunsets was just such a beautiful concept as well. This was also Barbie's first and only 3D release, not including the Barbie movie, of course, but I feel like you can definitely tell that that was the case, as there are a few like 3D gimmicky shots in there. And I don't even know if I actually ever watched the movie in 3D, but I do have a very vivid memory of those glasses that came along with the DVD. And honestly, although she might be my number 2 today, I think she might have been my number 1 as a kid. Like, I had everything. I had the DVD, the CD-ROM game, the Annika costume. I was her for Halloween one year. I had the Pegasus wings that I would embarrassingly wear around the house, the Cloud Castle playset and all of the dolls. I particularly remember loving the Rayla doll the most, and I thought that she was one of the prettiest Barbies that I owned. But yeah, I just love this movie and it will forever be very special to me. With all of that being said, that means that we have finally made it to my number 1. I think last time around this video was about half an hour long, and I have no doubt in my mind that I yapped for even more and that this video was even longer than that. But nonetheless, of course, at number 1 we have the one and only Princess and the Pauper.
Your most beautiful highness. What's this stupid cat doing here?
Honestly, at this point, I feel like I have kind of made it a part of my brand that I love this movie a somewhat unhealthy amount.
Now, Barbie as Princess and the Pauper, in my personal opinion, is like on a whole nother level from the rest of these 35 movies. Like, all of these movies are good, but Princess and the Pauper is great. Here's the rest of them, and then here's the tier that Princess and the Pauper exists on. It's on like another level. I don't even think it should be compared. Like, I would see this list as like my top 35, yeah, and then this is number 1 on the list of the best Barbie movies because it is the best. And there is no comparison, there is no competition.
So after Princess Annalise gets kidnapped through an evil plot to take over the throne, her royal tutor seeks the help of a seamstress who happens to be her doppelganger. And honestly, no matter how many times I've watched this movie, it never gets old and nothing will ever top it. Obviously, it's a musical and a perfect one at that. It was actually Barbie's very first musical, so that's a little fun fact. Free, A Girl Like You, Written in Your Heart, and my personal favorite, A Cat's Meow, are just all masterpieces. Now, Preminger, dare I say, he like surpasses this movie and is just so iconic even within his own right. And I do wonder if Martin Short even remembers working on this movie at all, and I would just die to be able to ask him about it one day, especially because he is the source of so many of my vocal stems from this movie. And listen, I know that we're all sick of these live action remakes and that we want some real original stories, but dare I say that a live action remake of The Princess and the Pauper is not a want, but a need. I think that Mattel doesn't understand the love and dedication that we have for these movies, and also just how good they were. Dare I say, I think that it could do even better in the box office than the Barbie movie. Is that a hyperbole? Maybe, but I said it. The love stories with both Annalise and Julian and Erica and Dominic are executed perfectly. The final scene where Erica says goodbye to him is just so precious, as well as when she makes the decision to come back in the end. I also love this scene of Annalise and Julian in the cave, as well as when he sings to her portrait during To Be a Princess. And I know that the whole Dominic Page disguise plotline wasn't really executed in the best way, but I do love it because it allowed him to be a part of the entire movie. And once again, all of the animals in this movie are great. Wolfie, Serafina, Hervé, and of course all of their kittens in the end of the movie. And to top it all off, the movie ends with a double wedding, which was just like cinematic genius to me as a 5-year-old. I also love the butterfly motifs and the bloopers. I know a few of the Barbie movies got bloopers, but this is the one that did it first and also the best in my opinion. Like, I'll never forget Breakdancing Julian. And yeah, honestly, I could go on and on about how much I love this movie, but I feel like I've been doing that for the past 6 years on this channel, and so I'll just leave it at that for today. And so with all that being said, that wraps up my anniversary of rewatching and ranking every single Barbie movie. I want to know which movie is your favorite, so please let me know in the comments down below. If you agree with me and that it's Princess and the Pauper, or if you think it's overrated at this point, please let me know. I want to know all of the thoughts and feelings. Also, if you haven't tuned in a while, recently I've been doing this really fun love story series, and I'm really excited about the next ship that I'm covering, so be sure to check out some of those videos if you'd like, or maybe subscribe and stay tuned for the next one that's coming out next month. And yeah, I believe that I said that I would allow myself to compare the lists now, so I'm gonna go rewatch that old video and I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back and I am shocked, to say the least. First of all, I am surprised that my top 5 is exactly the same. I really thought that I had 12 Dancing Princesses lower and Rapunzel higher, but I'm glad to know that I at least agree with past Caitlin on that. I cannot believe, like, I'm actually flabbergasted that Pink Shoes is number 6. I have no idea what I was thinking. I completely disagree now. Barbie Diaries at number 7 is like, fine. I really liked it as a kid, so like it makes sense. I am surprised that Island Princess made it in my top 10 last time as well. I was not expecting that. It's a bit lower at number 8, but it's still there, which is fun. Starlight Adventure at number 11 is kind of crazy work. I don't know what Caitlin was on there. Like, I do know. I really liked it, and it was the first time I had ever watched it, so I was really praising it. But I don't think it needs to be at number 11. Fashion Fairy Tale is still fairly high, which makes sense. I do love that movie. Rockin' Royals, that movie's too high. It should not be at number 14. Like, it's a good one, but it's not like top 15 material. Dolphin Magic above Diamond Castle, like, how are you people still watching me after I made that decision? I don't know. Yeah, and then we have Mermaid Tale 2 at number 19, but then the original Mermaid Tale is like down at number 27, which like hurt. Then we have Charm School and Mariposa, Pearl Princess. Christmas Carol is at number 25, which like I knew it would be low, but that still hurt, especially because the Mariposa sequel is above it, and Dolphin Magic, and Pearl Princess, like all of these movies that are not as good as Christmas Carol. The rest of the list I'm not too mad at. I don't know why Spy Squad is second last, and it did not deserve to be. Once again, I think I just wasn't paying attention to it, and so I just put it there. Also, Fairytopia Magic of the Rainbow being at number 23 was so heartbreaking because I loved it so much on this rewatch. And like, it's still Fairytopia, Caitlin. Why is it so low? Safe to say, I do not agree with or condone this list, and it was time for an upgrade. So anyways, Cater Tots, my name is Caitlin. I hope you all have a, wait, do I even say that anymore? No. Oh my God. Anyways, that's all I have to say for today. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you very, very soon. I cannot believe I had Pink Shoes at number 3 or 6. Pink Shoes? No. This list is awful. Like, I'm embarrassed that this video has 2 million views and these are the opinions that I was spewing on there.